am back from MagicCon Amsterdam, where there was a Pro Tour on. The modern Pro Tour for the modern format after Modern Horizons 3 dropped and basically rotated the entire format. The Nadu deck, the banned Nadu deck, won the event. It was also 5 out of the top 8 decks. It was pretty prevalent. I was pretty happy that I called the 2 biggest decks in the format. Both Ruby Storm and Nadu were the most represented. I'll talk about exact numbers in a moment. And I did videos about them last week and the week before, just about what I thought would be good and sharp in the Pro Tour. In today's video, I want to just highlight how Nadu did at the Pro Tour and talk about what that means for the future of the Nadu deck. I won't go too in depth about the exact build of the Nadu decks and how they win and combo, because I did a whole video on that. That'll be linked in the description and in the cards. I will talk about one minor innovation that I find kind of funny. We'll go into all of that and more in today's video. So this is Nadu. This is the Pro Tour winning breakout Modern Horizons 3 card that is more powerful than anything else in the set. It was the prominent, most popular deck, it was the most winningest deck, and it was the winner of the entire tournament. But before we jump into it, this video is brought to you by whatnot.com. Whatnot is a streaming service where you can buy things at auction like eBay meets Twitch, and I stream on it multiple times a month. There'll be links to my shows in the description below and a referral link, and if you use the referral link, get £10 off your first purchase. That's £10 off. So if you buy a £10 single, like a signed copy of a card from me, then you get the card for free and you just pay shipping. So come join me when we talk about Magic, we do giveaways, we do auctions, I lick things sometimes too on whatnot.com. Link in the description below. Let's begin with metagame percentage shares, shall we? The modern metagame breakdown provided by the very good, solid, incredible coverage over the weekend is as seen on screen right now. Bant Nadu comes in at 49 decks in amongst the field, making it 20% of the competing players in the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour. Now, that's not actually the full story. If you look a bit further down, you've got 4-color Nadu as well, the ones that are splashing for like things like Omnath, I believe, although there was even a Nadu deck splashing for Bowmaster, because it's a good answer to the Nantuko Shaman and the other Nadu decks. Oh, actually on this screen here, this is the 4-color one playing Oakish Bowmasters. I don't think the Omnath one actually showed up at the Pro Tour. But beyond that, there's even a little bit extra. In the other category, there's at least one singular player playing Nadu in their, here it is, 44th place in terms of standing, Devoted Nadu, one deck, playing a Devoted Druid Infinite Mana combo deck with Nadu slapped inside as well. It's interesting not to see like Hammer decks playing Nadu and similar in the Pro Tour. The main reason for that being is that everyone had established, or a lot of the pros had established, that Nadu was just the best deck to play. So why play the Hammer version? That means over 25% of the Pro Tour were on a Nadu deck. Now, some of you might not realize quite how high that is. Being over 10% would be quite a dramatic number. Being over 15% is kind of absurd. Being any higher than that is, by precedent of previous decks, absolutely bonkers. As an example, Hogak, a deck that was seen to be absolutely absurd, but everyone was prepared for it, came with a rather large showing of 21.6% of decks at its respective Pro Tour, and only got to the semi-finals, primarily because it warped the format to the point that people were playing Graveyard Hate in their main decks. Leyline of the Void was prevalent because people knew Hogak was coming. That relates to Ruby Storm a bit more, which I'll come to in a moment too. And people also remember Eldrazi Winter quite fondly for a time when Modern got absolutely broken by some releases that were at the time in Standard as opposed to a premium priced Horizon set. But the interesting thing is, if you go looking at the data, the Eldrazi decks were only 8.2% of the actual respective metagame at the time. A lot of people hadn't clicked on or found the best build of the Eldrazi deck. So although we remember Eldrazi Winter because it was called Eldrazi Winter and it was prominent across GPs and the Pro Tour at the time and got cards banned, namely Eye of Ugin, it was only 8.2% of the metagame. This means the best players in the world came to the conclusion that Nadu was the top deck. So much so that they thought that it was so good that instead of like teching against it like we saw in the Hogak era, we saw them just play it anyway. Here's a clip of Eli Cassis talking about his matchups.
We don't actually know what our bad matchup is, and that's why we're all on it. It's like the decks that just favored against everything, which is why it's probably getting banned. Game 1, we're a little bit of a dog to Storm, but after Game 1, it's like really favored. And I don't even know.
Apparently all of them, if none of them are bad.
I mean, you can't like compete with us by turn 3. Like I lost the game to getting on the play, turn 3, cast all his dust.
Oh.
And that was his only shot at winning. And Game 1 and 3, I was on the play. He had the turn 3, all his dust, and he lost.
Wow. Okay, yeah, play Bat Naughty while you can, friend.
But this doesn't tell the whole story, right? Let's look at some win rate percentages. Frank Carsten continues to be the gift that keeps on giving. He's officially on the coverage as well, but he's great for bringing us just stats and breakdowns for the number nerds amongst you. I'm no scientist or mathematician. I'm more of a dog scientist myself, actually, so I guess I technically am a scientist, but at least I can understand this on a basic level. At the top of the win percentages graph, you can see other decks did win more of their games. Murktide, Living End, Domain Zoo, Bank Control, Mario Midrange, basically 3 out of those 5 are much more familiar names amongst the Pro Tour. What you'll also notice amongst those numbers is that they hardly had any games against them because no one was playing them. Murktide had 10 games played with it, all Pro Tour. That's one player in Demir Murktide. Living End had 25 games played, so that's like 2.5 players. The point I'm leading to here, which is a bit of a side tangent and a different video for later in the week, is that none of the old vanguard of modern decks, Amulet, Murktide, Living End, Rhinos, none of those things that became prevalent or have been prevalent for a long time or became prevalent thanks to Modern Horizons 1 and 2 actually showed up in any great number. No one was playing them. Modern has rotated far worse than I had initially thought when it came to the Modern Horizons 3 card pool coming in. Now there are some things I'll go into in another video, like people playing with the newest toys, for example, or everyone being blinking on the newest stuff, and not enough time for testing because the set hadn't been out for long enough, and yada yada yada. Again, I'll cover that completely in another video, but I think it's interesting. But back to this statistics, Bant Nadu had 178 wins and 122 losses. That means it had a 59.3% win rate across a huge sample compared to every other deck in the tournament. Now, Ruby Storm was the second most played deck in the format, and it's right down here, 35.5% win rate. Before I go into the Nadu win rate a little bit more, Ruby Storm's win rate was bad. First of all, it seemed to be really bad into Bant Nadu, being only a 37% win rate, and had a 12% rate into Jessica Control on a much smaller sample. But the reality is, people were prepared for it. People went into this tournament knowing, or having the at least metagame call, that Bant, Nadu, and Ruby Storm would be big, and they came prepared for them. They came prepared for Ruby Storm, and it smashed Ruby Storm's win rate, because Ruby Storm is a relatively easy deck to hate out. More on that in just a second. Bant Nadu was a known entity that everyone was talking about, everyone was preparing for, and it still absolutely smashed and ripped and tore its way through the Pro Tour. It was a deck that was kind of difficult to prepare for, because the deck is kind of difficult to actually beat, even with preparation. And on the topic of beating out Ruby Storm, Dranith Magistrate, that's right, the CDH All-Star, was a very common sideboard card this weekend, being played in energy decks, the red white energy decks, being played in the sideboards of, I saw one Yorgmoth list playing for it, because they can chord for it and cast it off with one of their dorks and similar. Like, it's wild. Oh, and also the Bant Nadu decks can play it too. It's wild how many decks are actually playing Dranith Magistrate. I think it might have been one of the highest represented sideboard cards in the entire tournament. Between 1 and 3 copies, depending on what you're playing. Now, back to that magical number of 59.3. Some of you are going to say it's not that high, but of course a large sample size, that is very high. In order to balance out a game, you can't have a deck that has a 60% win rate when everyone else is stuck in the middling 40s. Ideally, you want to look for decks that have around a 40 to 50% win rate, right? You want to have decks that are beatable by their best matchups and beat their worst matchups, and also involve a bit of skill. It's not you just rock up and you just absolutely smash a lot of decks in the format. One of the most interesting things about the whole Nadu at the Pro Tour thing is that they made an innovation. Now, Thassa's Oracle, the win condition for drawing your whole deck, was not present in a lot of the lists. Now, you might be thinking, what's the new win con? Well, there kind of isn't a new one. Nothing has been added in place of Thassa's Oracle. Instead, what the deck is doing is that it can loop itself using endurance and the basically deterministically infinite mana the deck can make through the combo ring to recycle your library infinitely, and thus you can besage you away their permanents, and you can Otawara their permanents back to hand, and then just beat them to death with the creatures you have in play. Some of them being, again, huge because you've got a Bristly Bill in your deck, or just being a lot of 1/1s. That's right, the deck can go infinite and absolutely put your entire board state back into your hand or in the bin, and then kill you through a bunch of creatures. Playing a Thassa's Oracle in the deck is now considered actually a weaker version of the deck, a meme, or I believe Frank Carsten described it as training wheels, because you play it because it helps you to win faster because you don't know the loops. Meanwhile, not playing it, if you do know the loops, gives you an extra bit of gas because you aren't drawing a dead card as you move towards the combo. But to go back to that 60% win rate, because I haven't quite convinced you that it's good yet, let me take out the win rate of Hogak and Eldrazi as a historical precedent. The Hogak deck had a 56.2% win rate at its respective Mythic Championship. That means Nadu had a higher win rate than Hogak, and Hogak didn't even win the event. But people knew it was busted. busted as fuck. I actually struggled to find the exact win rate of the Eldrazi decks during Eldrazi Winter. Hell, there was a multitude of them, so you have to combine them, and it's kind of complicated. But at least the thing I can do is that 75% of the top 8 of that event was Eldrazi decks. Meanwhile, this time round, Nadu did represent less of the top 8, being only 5 out of 8, not 6 out of 8. Oh shit, that's only one off, really. But either way, it's comparable to the Eldrazi, and that caught a ban. So that brings us to the question of what they're going to do with the Bird and the Cheerio, the Nadu Breakfast, the banned Nadu deck. I wish they called it Nadu Breakfast on coverage. Are they going to ban something? At this point, with stats like that at the Pro Tour, it's almost certain that the deck won't live that long. And that's an interesting one, right? The set has only just come out. It's been out for, what, a month at this point? Some people might have even bought into the deck because it was doing well. I do think that if you are trying to play competitive Modern and buying into decks because they're doing well, you're smart enough or entrenched enough to understand that decks like this don't get to last forever. The question is, what do they ban, right? Sugar is the primary enabler. The card that's crept up in price in the Americas to over $30, maybe over $40 at the moment, perhaps. Banning Shuko does remove one of their combo lines, but it doesn't really change anything. You still have Nadu just comboing off with a ham sandwich. You have Outriders and Core, you have Bristly Bill. Bristly Bill being some tech that's not very good, but as far as I understand it, thanks to a Twitter user yesterday, it allows them to combo through Harsh Mentor, a sideboard tech that turns off activated abilities, but if you're doing triggered abilities, you're not dying to Harsh Mentor anymore. The other contender is the Nantuko Shaman thing as well. This thing would stop them being able to make lots and lots of bodies and become deterministic in terms of comboing off with the Shuko, but ultimately I don't think those things are the impacts or the hits that you'd want them to be. I actually think the deck would still be a menace even for just one of those things gone. And that's the thing, they try to ban the enablers instead of destroying the entire archetype, and Nadu has created a new archetype. So I predict they will incorrectly ban one of the lesser things first, and then ban Nadu later. Now the cynical perception of that as well is that they would do that to preserve the equity of buying Modern Horizons 3 packs. You don't want to ban an in-production rare, because then people will open the banned in-production rare as a feel-bads, and it's less likely to actually sell Modern Horizons 3 packs. I do believe somewhere along the line that consideration is made, maybe not by the Wizards of the Coast members on the ban announcements, but it's definitely a conversation that's being had at the company somewhere. But that said, I do like the idea of trying to let new decks still exist by banning out not the title card, for example. I just think in the case of Nadu, you can't really do that here. They tried it with Hogak, so you know the other reason people think about this in a cynical way is that Hogak took a little while to catch the ban it needed, and they banned like Bridge from Below first, saying it was the problem. So people are expecting the same this time. I'm hoping Wizards and the people in charge of the ban list at Wizards have learned from that mistake and have heard that feedback and heard that ridicule about the, keeping the Modern Horizons 3 card legal so it will sell packs sort of criticism, and they work and improve and make do or make good this time round by banning the Nadu sooner rather than later. Now, the point I made in the original video about how good Nadu was that maybe the metagame would adjust, maybe better players than me would figure out how to beat it. The Pro Tour proves that the latter of those statements is just not true. People thought it was the best deck and still couldn't figure out how to beat it. Will the metagame adjust? I don't think so. You have to understand that the Pro Tour is to excuse the term, an incestuous metagame in a sense. Everyone is like, there's whisperings behind the scenes between the teams, and there's knowledge there all getting pulled together, and then people come to conclusions and similar. People are often tuning towards the best deck at the time and not considering strange, weird rogue stuff because they don't think people will be on the rogue stuff. But the other element is that now Nadu has definitely got a crosshairs around its head. It's got a target on its back, so people may not even buy into or want to learn and get the reps and invest the time into the Nadu deck when playing in paper especially, and online. And thus, we're going to see if they let Nadu live, the metagame not really reflect, or the metagame data not really reflect how good Nadu actually is, because people will be scared to buy in. That said, I can see it winning some more tournaments, especially if people are prepared for Ruby. Although that said, let's talk about that as well. Ruby Storm was winning challenges on Modo because people just weren't prepared for it. And as people now shift their focus onto Nadu, and people are saying on Reddit, I saw this morning on the Spike subreddit, that Nadu Storm sucks, which is really funny because I don't think it does. I think it's actually incredibly strong if you aren't expecting it. Probably akin to the old Affinity decks that if you didn't have the Sonys in your sideboards or whatever, you just get run over by. They're the best decks when unprepared for. So now people are saying it sucks. It'd be so fun for people just to move those Dragon Magistrates out of the sideboards and get absolutely turn 2 combo by fucking Ruby Storm. Ultimately, I would not recommend anyone buying into this deck right now. I'm almost certain something from it will get banned and it won't last. or last forever. It won't last for much longer, if I'm honest. Pros at the Pro Tour were joking. Play Nadu now, because it won't be here for long. The last point I'll leave you on is that perhaps we need an emergency ban with the modern RCQ season starting up soon. That means that people don't necessarily want to have to go and field Nadu against Nadu. It's also a really fucking boring a game to watch, by the way. We haven't even touched on that problem at the Pro Tour, but people don't have to prepare for and play against Nadu, especially for them to ban it like mid-season and stuff. The one-on-one modern events, they're going to have to ban Nadu sooner rather than later. They can't let people go into the season having prepped for it to then get it banned out from under them, and then all that prep is wasted. It's not fair. In many ways, I'm not upset about it being like this at the Pro Tour. It's both exciting and interesting as a narrative, and I'm okay with the pros doing it because they're the pros, right? I just don't think every man should have to put up with a deck that will sooner or later be banned. I don't think that's good for Magic. I'll be back soon with a video talking about Modern Horizons and the rotation. Don't forget, if you want to check out Whatnot, there's a link in the description below for £10 off your first purchase or $10 off your first purchase. And I'll be a link to my show down there as well. And the Nadu combo video is down there as well. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time, bitches. Ta-ta for now.